They saw a curvy black woman in greasy overalls, a problem to be dealt with. But on her skin was a tattoo marking her as commander of a ghost unit, a secret a powerful general would do anything to keep buried. The North Carolina sun was a merciless hammer, beating down on the asphalt outside the main gate of Fort Bragg. Sweat trickled down Zara Kincaid's temples, carving clean paths through the grease smudged on her high cheekbones. At 45, Zara was a woman forged in fire, a stunning paradox of grit and grace. Her figure, a statuesque hourglass with a full E-cup bust, was poured into a grease-stained tank top and a pair of worn cargo pants, the powerful curves of her body a stark contrast to the masculine nature of her work. Her hands, strong and sure, moved with methodical purpose deep within the engine of her classic Land Rover Defender. The vintage vehicle, restored and rugged, was her trusted companion on these annual pilgrimages, solitary journeys to honor the ghosts of her past, the fallen soldiers of a unit that officially never existed. This pilgrimage was a sacred promise, and for the Defender to die now, at the very gates of one of the largest military installations in the world, felt like a cruel joke from the gods of irony. She could feel the stares. She'd felt them her whole life. The curious, condescending glances from passers-by who saw only a black woman, a shockingly buxom one at that, in a place they felt she didn't belong, doing a job they assumed she couldn't possibly understand. Zara ignored them, her focus narrowed to the mechanical symphony of the engine. The scent of hot metal and leaking coolant was more familiar to her than perfume. Her fingers, once nimble enough to field strip a rifle in total darkness, probed for the source of the problem, a loose fuel line connection. The crunch of military-issue boots on gravel broke her concentration. Years of combat-honed situational awareness told her 3 individuals, were approaching. She didn't look up. "Ma'am, you can't work on a vehicle here," a young voice called out, dripping with the unearned authority of a new uniform. Slowly, Zara straightened up, her back protesting the awkward angle. She turned and faced 3 white military police officers. The one who had spoken, his name tag reading Davidson, couldn't have been more than 20. His eyes did a quick, dismissive sweep, taking in her sweat-stained tank top that clung to her chest, her grease-covered hands, and her race, and filed her away under problem. "Afternoon, officers," Zara replied, her voice calm and even, carrying a warmth that belied the steel beneath. "Just a faulty fuel line. I'll be out of your hair in 5 minutes." Davidson's gaze lingered on her chest for a fraction of a second too long before flicking to the formidable bulk of the Defender. "This is a restricted area, ma'am. I'm going to need to see some identification and your vehicle registration." His tone was clipped, official, the kind used to establish dominance. "Of course," Zara said, maintaining her composure. "It's in my bag, on the passenger seat." As she reached into the vehicle, she saw the other 2 MPs tense up, their hands hovering near their holsters. It was a familiar, exhausting dance. She moved with deliberate slowness, retrieving her bag and then her wallet. She handed over her driver's license and her retired military ID card. Davidson took them, his eyes widening slightly as he read the second card. He looked from the plastic card to the woman in front of him, a disbelieving smirk playing on his lips. "Colonel Zara Kincaid," he read aloud, his voice thick with skepticism. "United States Army, retired." He looked her up and down again, a clear, insulting appraisal. "That's a good one. You really think we're going to fall for that?" A familiar heat coiled in Zara's stomach, the hot, bitter sting of being dismissed, of her life's work being invalidated by a child in a uniform who saw her as a caricature, not a commander. "That ID is genuine, officer," she said, her voice dropping a register, losing its warmth and gaining a hard, clear edge. "I served for 25 years. I suggest you run it." The second MP, a stocky kid named Connors, leaned in to mutter to Davidson. "Gotta be fake, man. Look at her. A colonel? No way." Davidson's smirk widened into a full-blown sneer. He was enjoying this. He held up her ID card. "So, Colonel, What's your business here at Fort Bragg? Here to visit your boyfriend? Maybe do some laundry for the GIs? The sexist jab, layered on top of the racial condescension, was designed to break her. To make her angry, to make her cry, to make her anything other than the calm, imposing woman who stood before him. Zara held his gaze, refusing to give him the satisfaction. I'm here to visit a cemetery, officer. To pay my respects to fallen soldiers. A concept I'm sure you'll learn about one day, if you're lucky. The insult, delivered with surgical precision, hit its mark. Davidson's face flushed a blotchy red. All right, that's it. You're being willfully obstructive. I'm placing you under temporary detainment until we can verify your identity and search this vehicle. He reached for his handcuffs. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. The situation was escalating, spiraling into a dangerous absurdity. Zara's mind, a tactical computer, calculated the odds, the potential outcomes. She could comply and endure the humiliation. Or she could resist, and risk a violent confrontation that, for a black woman, no matter her record, would only end one way. Just as she was about to speak, a black sedan with government plates and a 4-star flag on the bumper pulled to a stop behind the MP patrol car. The rear door opened, and a man emerged who seemed to command the very air around him. General Julian Hayes was a tall, imposing black man in his late 50s, his uniform a constellation of ribbons and medals. He strode toward the confrontation, his eyes taking in the scene with a practiced, all-encompassing sweep. What in the hell is going on here, Sergeant? General Hayes's voice was a low baritone that rumbled with natural authority. Davidson immediately snapped to attention, his face paling. Sir. General, sir. We have a situation. A suspicious individual in a modified vehicle, refusing to cooperate, claiming to be a retired officer. General Hayes's gaze moved past the flustered MP and landed on Zara. He saw the grease, the defiant posture, the powerful femininity. He saw a woman being cornered. His eyes scanned her, his expression unreadable, until his gaze fell upon her left arm. As Zara had been working, the sleeve of her tank top had ridden up high on her shoulder. There, on the powerful curve of her bicep, amidst a fine web of old, silvery scars, was a tattoo. It was faded black ink, depicting a stylized panther, coiled and ready to strike. Something flickered in the general's eyes. Recognition. Disbelief. Awe. He had heard the stories, the whispers in classified briefings and late-night conversations at the Pentagon. A legend of a ghost unit, an all-black special operations team that took on missions no one else would, whose very existence was denied at the highest levels. The Phantom Directorate. General Hayes's entire demeanor shifted. The stoic commander vanished, replaced by a soldier in the presence of a legend. He drew himself up to his full height, his back ramrod straight. Then, in the full view of the 3 stunned MPs and the gathering crowd of onlookers, 4-star General Julian Hayes executed a perfect, crisp salute. Not to a superior officer, but to the curvy black woman in the grease-stained tank top. Colonel Kincaid, he said, his voice filled with a reverence that silenced the entire street. It is a profound honor, ma'am. The world seemed to hang suspended in that single, impossible moment. The sight of a 4-star general saluting a woman they were about to handcuff was a reality-bending event that Davidson's young mind couldn't process. He and the other MPs stood frozen, their mouths agape, looking like statues of bewildered fools. Zara, after a moment of genuine surprise, returned the salute with the ingrained precision of a lifetime of service. Her hand snapped to her brow, her posture perfect, transforming in an instant from a civilian mechanic back into the officer she was. General Hayes held his salute until she dropped hers. He then turned to the petrified MPs, his eyes now chips of ice. Sergeant Davidson, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. You will return Colonel Kincaid's identification immediately. You will apologize for your unprofessional conduct. And then you will remove yourself and your men from my sight. But sir, the vehicle modifications, security protocols," Davidson stammered. "Are you questioning my order, Sergeant?" Hayes's voice dropped another octave. "No, sir," Davidson squeaked. He practically threw Zara's IDs back at her, mumbled a terrified apology, and scrambled back to his patrol car with his two silent partners. They sped away as if fleeing a natural disaster. General Hayes turned back to Zara, his expression softening. "Colonel Kincaid, I am General Julian Hayes. I must offer my deepest apologies for the reception you've received at my installation." "No apology necessary, General," Zara said, her composure fully restored. "I've had worse welcomes." "I have no doubt," Hayes said, a flicker of a knowing smile on his face. He glanced at the tattoo, now partially covered again by her sleeve. "I've only heard legends. Whispers. Most of us thought the Phantom Directorate was a myth. A story we told ourselves to make sense of missions that, on paper, were impossible. The missions were real, General," Zara said quietly. "And so were the men and women who never came back from them." A look of profound understanding passed between them. "Your vehicle," Hayes said, changing the subject. "Please, allow my motor pool to handle it. It would be an honor. And I insist you come on base as my personal guest. There are things we should discuss." Recognizing the unspoken message, Zara agreed. Within minutes, her Defender was being gently loaded onto a military tow truck, and she was sitting in the passenger seat of the General's sedan, sweeping through the main gate with the very MPs who just harassed her now snapping to attention as they passed. Their first stop was the office of the base commander, Colonel James Reynolds. Reynolds was a wiry white man in his 50s with a perpetual frown and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. When General Hayes introduced Zara, Reynolds's handshake was brief and cold. His eyes flickered to her arm, a clear sign that he knew exactly what the salute he'd undoubtedly been told about had meant. "Colonel Kincaid," Reynolds said, his voice devoid of warmth. "An unexpected pleasure. What brings a veteran of your unique background to Fort Bragg?" The way he said unique made it sound like a disease. "I'm on a personal pilgrimage, Colonel," Zara replied evenly. "My vehicle broke down." "So I heard," Reynolds said, leaning back against his desk. "We'll have it fixed and have you on your way as quickly as possible. I'm sure you have places to be." It wasn't an offer, it was a dismissal. A clear message that her presence here was unwelcome. General Hayes intervened. "Colonel Kincaid is my guest, James. I'd like her to be extended every courtesy. VIP quarters, access to the officers' club." Reynolds's thin smile was anything but friendly. "Of course, General. Anything you say. We'll assign a lieutenant to escort her, to make sure she has everything she needs." Zara understood the subtext perfectly. The escort wasn't for her comfort, it was for surveillance. A new, more dangerous conflict had just begun. It wasn't a loud confrontation on an open road, but a quiet, cold war in the corridors of power, against men who knew her secrets and wanted them to stay buried. The escort assigned to Zara was a sharp, young first lieutenant named Maya Vance. She was professional, polite, and her eyes held a flicker of intense curiosity as she led Zara to the VIP quarters. The room was clean, impersonal, and Zara knew it was likely bugged. "If there's anything you need, ma'am, please let me know," Lieutenant Vance said, her hand hovering near the door. "Actually, Lieutenant," Zara began, deciding to test the waters, "you can tell me what your real orders are." Vance was taken aback by the directness. After a moment's hesitation, a flicker of respect crossed her face. "My orders are to stay with you, ma'am. And to report on your conversations and movements to Colonel Reynolds." Zara nodded, appreciating the honesty. "Then let's give him something to listen to." She gestured for the young officer to sit. "Have you ever wondered, Lieutenant, why certain stories get told in the army, and others get buried?" For the next hour, Zara spun a carefully edited tale. She spoke of a unit formed in the shadows, comprised of soldiers the system deemed expendable but whose skills were undeniable. An all-black unit sent on missions where failure wasn't an option and survival was an afterthought. She spoke of their successes, their sacrifices, and the silence that followed, the way their victories were credited to others, and their fallen were listed as casualties of training accidents. Lieutenant Vance listened, her initial military rigidity melting away, replaced by a dawning sense of awe and injustice. Meanwhile, General Hayes was in his office, engaged in his own battle. He had requested all files pertaining to covert operations during the late Cold War period. The response he received was a bureaucratic stonewall. "I'm sorry, General," the records clerk told him over a secure line, "but those archives are sealed. Level 10 classification." "On whose authority?" Hayes demanded. There was a pause. "The order is from the Department of the Army, sir." Countersigned by General Harold Morrison, retired. The name hit Hayes like a physical blow. General Morrison. A legend from the Vietnam era, a man who had held immense power in the intelligence community for decades. He was in his 80s now, but his influence still ran deep, a shadow puppeteer pulling strings long after he'd officially left the stage. And Hayes knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that Morrison was the architect of the Phantom Directorate. And the man who had ordered its erasure. He understood now. Reynolds wasn't the real threat. He was just a gatekeeper. The true antagonist, the man who had buried Zara's history, was still out there, and he had just been alerted that one of his ghosts had walked out of the past and onto the grounds of Fort Bragg. The phone on his desk rang. It was his aide. "Sir, General Morrison's office is on the line. He's demanding to know why you are inquiring about classified Cold War archives." The Cold War, it seemed, was not over. It had just followed Zara Kincaid to his doorstep. He now knew that Zara's car trouble wasn't just an inconvenience, it was the tripwire for a bomb that had been waiting to detonate for over 30 years. He had to warn her. He had to prepare her. Because General Morrison wasn't just a man who buried history, he was a man who buried the people who tried to unearth it. The news of Zara's presence at Fort Bragg traveled through encrypted channels faster than any official report. General Morrison, even in his opulent retirement in Virginia, had tripwires and sentinels everywhere. Within hours of Hayes's inquiry, Morrison was on a private jet, hurtling south. He was not coming to reminisce, he was coming to contain a threat he thought he had neutralized decades ago. He arrived like a storm front, his presence preceded by a wave of nervous energy that put the entire base on edge. He summoned Zara and General Hayes to a secure conference room in the base command building. Colonel Reynolds was already there, looking like a nervous underling. Morrison, now in his 80s, was still formidable. His eyes, pale blue and cold as a winter sky, held the chilling authority of a man who had made life-and-death decisions without hesitation. "Colonel Kincaid," Morrison began, his voice a smooth, dangerous purr. "It has been a very long time. Your unscheduled arrival has created complications. I'm a retired officer visiting a cemetery, General," Zara stated, her voice even. "The only complication seems to be your discomfort with my existence." Morrison's thin lips tightened. "Your existence, as commander of a unit that never was, is a matter of national security. That tattoo on your arm is a liability. I am here to formally request you sign a new, updated non-disclosure agreement, binding you to perpetual silence." "I will not," Zara said flatly. "The silence you imposed on us for 30 years is over. This isn't a negotiation, Colonel." Reynolds snapped, trying to curry favor with his old mentor. General Hayes stood up. "General Morrison, you have no authority to compel a retired officer to do anything. Colonel Kincaid is my guest." Morrison ignored him, his cold eyes locked on Zara. "Perhaps we should discuss Operation Thunderbird." The name dropped into the room like a grenade. Zara felt a jolt, a phantom pain from an old wound. She saw the flash of an explosion, heard the screams of men she had led, men she had lost. "What about it, General?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. The part where you sent us into Laos to recover evidence of your own illegal arms deals? Or the part where you abandoned us at the extraction point, leaving my entire team to die, just to cover your tracks? The accusation, raw and unfiltered, hung in the air. Reynolds and even Hayes looked shocked. Morrison's composure finally cracked. "You have no proof," he hissed. "Don't I?" Zara leaned forward, the strategist in her taking command. "Before we were disbanded, before you scattered us to the winds, the survivors of the Phantom Directorate created a failsafe. A complete, unredacted archive of every mission we ever ran. Every report, every photograph, every commendation you buried. Every piece of evidence from Thunderbird. We call it the cache. She let that sink in. And for 30 years, we have waited for the right moment. For one of us to be pushed too far. For you to make a mistake." She gave him a cold, predatory smile. "You arriving here today, General. That was your mistake." A frantic energy seized Morrison. He barked orders at Reynolds to lock down the base, to find the other surviving members of her unit. But it was too late. Across the country, phones began to ring. In a quiet suburb of Chicago, a history professor's phone buzzed. In a fishing boat off the coast of Florida, a satellite phone chirped. In a dusty workshop in Arizona, a retired mechanic put down his tools. The call had come. The ghosts were gathering. The hunt for the cache was on, and a final, desperate battle for the truth had begun. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in covert operations, run not by active-duty soldiers, but by a handful of men and women in their 60s and 70s. While General Morrison and Colonel Reynolds turned Fort Bragg upside down, creating checkpoints and monitoring all communications, the surviving members of the Phantom Directorate moved like ghosts, just as they had been trained to do. They converged on a forgotten location in the swamps of South Carolina, a place only they knew. There, hidden beneath the foundation of a ruined hunting lodge, was the cache. They retrieved the waterproof, climate-controlled containers that held their entire history, a history Morrison had tried to burn. With the evidence secured, they executed the second phase of their long-dormant plan. A complete digital copy was handed off to a trusted contact, the investigative journalist daughter of one of their fallen comrades. Back at Fort Bragg, General Hayes ran interference, using his rank and bureaucratic mastery to tangle Morrison's efforts in red tape. He created phantom security threats on the other side of the base, leaked false intelligence about Zara's location, and bought his old heroes the time they needed. When Zara's team returned, it wasn't through the main gate. They came in with a convoy of sympathetic veterans, their evidence cases hidden in plain sight amongst camping gear. They walked directly into the base's media center, where, thanks to a tip from the journalist, a handful of national reporters were already waiting, having been told a major story on military whistleblowers was about to break. The press conference was a quiet bombshell. Zara, flanked by her reunited comrades, laid out the evidence with cold, irrefutable precision. They presented mission logs next to the official, falsified records. They showed photographs of their team on missions that the Pentagon had credited to other, predominantly white units. They played audio recordings of debriefings, the voices of young black soldiers detailing acts of incredible heroism. The final piece of evidence was from Operation Thunderbird. They revealed documents proving Morrison had orchestrated a back-channel weapons deal, and when the Phantom Directorate recovered the evidence, he had deliberately abandoned them to be killed, erasing the mission to cover up his treason. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Morrison. The journalist's story went live in the middle of the press conference, and the Pentagon, faced with irrefutable proof and a public relations nightmare, had no choice but to act. The President of the United States issued a statement, and within days, General Morrison was under federal investigation. But for Zara, the victory wasn't Morrison's downfall. It was the restoration of her unit's honor. A week later, a formal ceremony was held at Arlington National Cemetery. The names of the 17 fallen soldiers of the Phantom Directorate were finally dedicated on a new, black granite memorial. The president awarded the unit a Presidential Unit Citation, and posthumous medals of honor were given to the families of those lost. After the ceremony, Zara finally got back into her fully repaired Land Rover Defender. Her pilgrimage was not over, but she was no longer alone. In a convoy behind her were her surviving comrades, their families, and a new generation of soldiers, including General Hayes and Lieutenant Vance. They were going to visit the graves of their fallen, not as forgotten ghosts, but as acknowledged heroes. As she drove, Zara glanced at the tattoo on her arm. For decades, it had been a secret mark of pain and resilience, a silent promise to the dead. Today, it was a public symbol of victory, a testament to the fact that no history can stay buried forever, and no truth can be permanently erased. The shadows had finally come into the light. The story of the Phantom Directorate is a powerful reminder of how easily history can be manipulated and how courageously it must be defended. What are your thoughts on this long overdue justice? Let us know in the comments, but please, always comment with respect. If this story of resilience and vindication moved you, please hit that like button, share it with others who need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that bring hidden truths to light. Thank you for honoring the legacy of these American heroes.